If electric cars are so swell, how come we have to pay people to drive them?
Senator Kennedy. So that's always what happens when a witness takes a long time. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to all our witnesses. I'm sorry I was late. I was in another committee. How many of you drive an electric car, own an electric car? Okay. You gentlemen don't?
If you mean electric by a battery electric, no. If you mean plug-in electric, yes.
Okay. Of the three folks who raised their hands, how many do you own gasoline-powered cars at all? No?
No, Senator.
No, all electric. Okay. Let me ask you all this, and please give me brief answers, because there are five of you. There's only one of me. Okay. If electric cars are so swell, how come we have to pay people to drive them?
The upfront costs of an electric vehicle are about $10,000 higher today than they are for an equivalent internal combustion engine vehicle today,
else?
But that cost is declining substantially.
Right.
And so this is a temporary intervention to help the auto industry strategically compete in global markets and to transition as battery costs fall.
You didn't hear my admonition, okay?
Sorry.
Doc, how about if electric vehicles are so swell, how come we have to pay people to drive them?
I think sorry, Senator, I'll step
I'm
away
sorry,
from.
I can't see the names.
Oh, it's Gross, Ms. Gross here. I'll defer to not comment on policy questions about incentives and so on. Maybe
Tell
pass
me
it
your
off
name.
to
I
Ms.
can't
Hinman.
see your name tag.
Gross? I can switch.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I can swivel it.
I apologize. Would you start over?
I was just going to say I'd like to defer on policy grounds, not to talk about policy incentives and so on. Defer over to my
Why not?
colleague here, Ms. Hinman.
You don't believe in electric cars?
Oh, totally support electric vehicles and drive 3 of them myself.
So if they're so swell, how come we're having to pay people to drive them?
So just speaking personally, then, not representing my company at this point.
Sure.
Speaking personally.
Who's your company?
EPRI, the Electric Power Research Institute.
Oh, okay.
And I have to be careful about policy stepping into, wading too deeply into policy as an independent leader here. But when we think about, again, I just want to ditto what Dr. Jenkins said. This is an effort to compete globally.
I know all that, but how, if they're so swell, how come we have to pay people to drive them?
Well, maybe then the quick answer for me is I didn't take advantage of incentives, but I also bought used vehicles on the market. I love it. They're wonderful to drive. And so on.
Okay.
Senator, similar for myself.
What's your name?
Maureen Hinman.
Damn.
My hair's longer in my picture, sorry.
I'm sorry. I don't even know who I'm talking to. Go ahead, Ms. Hinman.
I did want to follow up with my colleague, Ms. Gross. I purchased my first EV, fully
Yes,
electric.
ma'am. But if they're so
2015.
swell, how come we have to pay people to drive them?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but we purchased our first vehicle in 2015 because it was easier to charge, cheaper to drive. It drives better, faster, smoother. There's no muck on the bottom of our garage. And frankly, when I had my first child, some of the safety features were just better.
But here's what I'm sorry, you're not answering my question. How many cars do we have in the United States?
280.
This lady right here. In the middle. I'm sorry. If I could see your name, I wouldn't just point to you.
If I could, I'd like to defer to my colleague who
Well,
has
I'd like
better.
to hear your answer, okay?
How many calls?
How many cars are there?
295 million?
Okay. And what percentage are electric vehicle?
1.6.
Okay. Hold up that chart. Here's where all electric vehicles are. California loves them. The West Coast loves them. Everybody else is kind of lukewarm. Okay, I'm trying to understand why. But let me move on to this. Let me ask these two gentlemen. I think the reason is because they're more expensive, and people when they drive a car like it to run, and when it runs out of electricity, it stops, and they can't find a place to charge them. So let me ask these two gentlemen. I don't want to be unfair. So it's clear we got a long way to go. We got 283 million cars in America, and we got 3.3 million electric vehicles. We got a long way to go. And at least these three folks think that we need to take taxpayer money and give enough money to American people so they'll walk away from gas cars and drive electric vehicles. How much is that going to cost? I'm going to ask them in a second if I have time. But how much do you think it will cost for us to basically bribe every American to drive an electric car?
Well, Senator, excuse me, Dave Sweeter with the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. I would just underscore your original question with this. There's really two things at play as it relates to what's happening.
How much money do you think it'll cost
Costs
to
are
bribe the American people enough to make them drive electric cars, to move those numbers?
Electrification's increasing as it relates to cost. Only a fraction of currently eligible
How much do you
vehicles
think
are
it'll
eligible
cost?
for the federal tax credit. So
How much do you think it'll cost, David?
Senator, I think I quoted earlier
I'm
that
calling on you, sir.
Apologies.
How much do you think it'll cost?
it ultimately depends on
You
consumer
don't know,
adoption.
do you?
We don't have an exact figure.
You think
no,
we'll
Senator.
just keep throwing money at it until we hit the jackpot? How about you, Mr. Davis?
Eventually, if you put enough charging stations there to solve for range anxiety, because the reason I didn't buy one is because I may have to drive 450
How
miles
much
to
do you
East
think
Tennessee
it'll
and explore
cost
Woman.
the American taxpayer for us to convince the American people, frankly, bribe the American people to get rid of the gas car and drive an electric car? Can any of you give me a figure?
Senator, the Treasury Department reports we spent about $1 billion year to date. So for the first half of this year, so roughly $2 billion this
Well,
year.
we're behind.
As I noted,
How much do you think it'll cost, Doctor? You're a doctor,
so
right?
$2 billion this year is what the estimate from the Treasury
Okay,
Department.
How much do you think it will cost for us to, let's say, get 75% of these 200?
How much will it cost American consumers to remain?
How much? Do you know how much it'll cost, Doctor?
No one knows the future with certainty, Senator.
Right. You just think we ought to keep throwing money at it until we hit the jackpot.
I think
Is
we
that
ought to
right?
set a stable policy framework that allows American consumers to become familiar with the environment and American businesses to innovate and to compete within that stable framework. That's what I said
And how
earlier in
much
my
will
testimony.
that cost?
Will cost less than the benefits delivered by
You
the
don't
policy.
care how much it costs, do you?
I care if the benefits exceed the costs. I don't care about the costs.
You
These are
don't care how
investments
much
in the
it
public.
costs, do you?
I care very much how much it costs. As long as the benefits exceed the costs, that's an investment worth making.
Well, so, okay.
How much
So
does it cost to seed the industries of the future to China?
I get to ask the questions, Doc.
Sorry.
You're at Princeton, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. How are Jewish students doing at Princeton? Are they feeling better?
No, that has
more
nothing to do with the hearing today. I'm
I
not going
didn't
to
think
comment on
you'd
that.
I didn't think you'd want to talk about that. Do any of you have any idea how much it would cost to
Senator,
get, say, 75% of the American people
Senator,
driving electric cars?
if I could, your question is fair. One answer to it is the cost of inaction of the U.S. not competing is far greater than any incentive on the front
Okay,
end.
quantify that for me. Oh, man, I'm way over. I'm sorry, Sheldon. Quantify that for me, because here's
Once
my...
you wrap up with this, because I think
I will.
everybody's had a chance to try to
I will.
answer your question, and
Here's
you're
my
repeating
problem.
it at this
Okay,
point.
we all want clean air. We all want bright water. We all want to eat, and we all want to live indoors. Okay? But there are trade-offs in all of this. Despite what the Princeton professor thinks, we don't have unlimited money. This is not Princeton. So we have to decide the cost and the benefits. And nobody seems to be able to quantify the costs. They just say, keep throwing money at it, throwing money at it, throwing money at it. And nobody can really quantify the benefits, except if we don't do it, then we're all going to die. And when I go back to my people and say, your electricity costs have gone up 30%, but it's for a good cause. Why, Kennedy? Because you're going to die if we don't do it. Why, Kennedy? Because a professor at Princeton says so. That doesn't work for most Americans. Can you answer that for me? You see my frustration. I love driving an electric car. I think they're really cool. But the median household income in my state's $55,000. Our Princeton professor probably makes that in a week. Okay? They don't care what they think at Princeton. Can you answer that for me, guys?
I can't answer how much it's going
Good.
to cost, but I can tell you that just last year alone, China in the EV market subsidized it by $12.4 billion, and that's their annual spend. It's more than, even with in our best year, it's more than
And
two-thirds of the
China's
United
doing
States
great,
spends.
but let me ask you a question. How much will it cost China to become carbon neutral by 2050?
I am very concerned. Well, they won't, but I'm more concerned about the
How much
risk
would it
to the
cost
U.S.
them?
economy of
How
losing
much
the
would
auto
it-
manufacturing industry.
How much would it cost them? Do you know? See, nobody talks about the cost. I'll tell you how much it'll cost them. It'll cost them $1 trillion a year starting today to be carbon neutral by 2050. You know how much it'll cost Russia? $250 billion a year. 3 times what their defense budget. Now, if you believe that Vladimir Putin is going to spend $250 billion for climate change, then you'll never own your own home. So we go spend all this money, which y'all can't quantify. We just keep spending. They don't spend the money. They're at an advantage, and you know how much world temperatures are lowered? None. 0, zilch, nada. And I can't believe our chairman hadn't cut me off. But I am done.
Now's your moment. Thank
I
you,
am
Senator
done.
Kennedy, for your enthusiastic participation in this hearing.
I just wish we had
Let
time
me,
to talk about all this. I think this is
wrap up.
fascinating.
Senator Johnson, who will be followed by Senator Van Hollen.
So to prove my environmental bona fides here, my wife has a hybrid SUV, pretty good sized one. And we've actually had it up over 30 miles per gallon. That's when she plugs it in. Every now and again she doesn't, so I think we're down to about 28 right now. So we watch that, okay? Now, I've always wondered, and it's interesting, Senator Kaine, you mentioned $1 a gallon. Is that I don't know, I've never heard really what does it cost. Is that about right, that it's equivalent of about $1 a gallon per gas to charge a EV versus what it costs for gallon gas, whoever's got the information?
Yeah, Senator, I think that's fair. Obviously, it's going to base largely on the utility rates, but I think the working numbers anywhere from 2/3 less costly compared to a gallon equivalent. So whether it's $1 or $1.50.
Well, I'd say it's about 1/3 of the cost. Again, that's pretty attractive. Okay, you've got the smooth ride. You got fast acceleration. There's a lot of benefits. Okay, as well as in the fact if you're just using a hybrid like my wife does, driving around town, never even has to use gas. So I'm not opposed. But my question is, if they've got so many market appeals, why do we need government subsidies? Take it up. I would say you don't. We should end them. Mr. Schwietert.
Sure, Senator. Obviously, you're talking about affordability generally. Excuse me. Obviously, when it comes to the record number of products, it's both the industrial policy as well as the marketplace dynamics.
We mess up when government doesn't do very well. For example, we spent $7.5 billion to do charging stations. After more than 2 years, we've got 7 of them. Testimony was talking about we've basically run the Highway Trust Fund into insolvency, and we haven't really fixed that. Why is China producing all these electric vehicles? For its own home market? It's for central planning,
Sure.
Industrial engineering in other countries, correct? Is there any major Western country that doesn't subsidize EVs because of climate alarmism? How many U.S. automakers are making money producing EVs?
Senator, as I said in my remarks, we're in the early innings. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So yes, costs are going to have to come down.
Yeah, well, how much are they losing on average?
It depends on the manufacturer and their product cycle.
So why are they doing it? Because they're getting government subsidies, right? The consumers are being subsidized, and the automakers are also being subsidized, correct? And the mandate we're talking about are the things like CAFE standards that coerce them to offer EVs so they can produce vehicles that American consumers do want. I mean, I'd never go to 100% EV. Happy to do the hybrid, happy to be environmental. I want the comfort of having an internal combustion engine.
Yeah, Senator, as it relates to the recent auto standards, we've been pretty clear with the Biden administration. Obviously, we need to ensure that there's alignment as it relates to where the market is, as well as encouraging.
No, there won't be alignment where the market is. Government's not that smart. I mean, honestly, $7.5 billion. We have 7 charging stations. We've run the Highway Trust Fund back 2008 insolvent. We haven't fixed that problem. And we're going to have this command economy, and we're going to plan for a growth in the electrical grid. By the way, we don't have the mining capacity. I would argue we really don't have the electrical capacity. Those climate alarmists are generally opposed to nuclear, which certainly would be part of the problem. China dominates the battery industry, and our subsidies are providing a market for China's command economy. How does any of this make sense?
Senator, just with respect, our subsidies are targeted to U.S. manufacturing of batteries through 45X, and the consumer EV tax credits are specifically designed to excise China from the supply chain.
How many consumers have experienced the cost of replacing a battery in an EV?
It's an extremely rare occurrence.
What percent? What
it's an
percent?
Extremely rare occurrence.
It's gonna. They don't last forever, do they? How long do they last?
Neither does an internal combustion engine car or transmission.
There are cars on the road from the 30s and 40s and 50s. How long is an EV battery going to last? And what is the cost to replace it?
EV batteries account for anywhere from 30 to 40% of upfront costs. Obviously, there's warranty and durability built into those batteries, but yes.
How long do they last?
The battery itself can last quite some time, and then, of course, it can be repurposed and reused.
A couple 100,000 miles at least.
Yeah.
We've had Teslas on the road with that many miles already.
And it's going to cost
$10,000,
$20,000 to replace?
Well, that's the cost today.
What about recycling of them? What about recycling of wind turbines? Now, I'm seeing these pictures of these massive dumps of these wind turbines just collapsing. And again, it doesn't make economic sense because government is trying to centrally plan, and government's awful at it.
I just wanted to pipe in if I could,
Sure.
sir, on battery recycling. Batteries are eminently recyclable and are near
Not
closed
these,
loop.
not the lithium batteries. We don't have capacity for doing it right now.
Well,
we
actually,
haven't developed
we're building that
a way of
capacity.
doing it.
We are building that capacity, and certainly the U.S. is a leader in the standards.
Kind of like Senator Brown was talking about, yeah, we have to rely on all these technological innovations we don't have yet. And let's face it, they've been trying to innovate batteries for decades and really haven't been able to do it, have they?
I'm not sure I would agree with that. The costs have fallen dramatically. The density has doubled in the last 9 years or 7 years. So battery innovation is dramatic, and with
That's
support.
good. So let the marketplace dictate the speed of this innovation. Stop subsidizing this. That's my only point. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm opposed to government intervention in the marketplace. We just screw things up, and as Senator Brown said, we can't afford it. $35 trillion in debt. We just can't afford all this stuff. Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Van Hollen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all of you for your testimony. I just make a couple points at the outset. When you have a huge, what economists call externality, which is climate change, I know some of my colleagues don't really believe in that as a threat, but that is exactly where you want government action. And I also heard Senator Graham at the outset talk about how China will potentially, and is right now, on a road, if we don't do something about it, to eat our lunch. I mean, the reality is countries around the world, consumers around the world are going to be purchasing electric vehicles, and either we're at the top of our game or we're going to be left dramatically behind. So that's why I'm pleased that Maryland is one of the states that has set very ambitious goals in terms of EVs, target for 300,000 by 2025. And we're one of 15 states that have committed to ramp up the electrification of medium and heavy duty trucks so that all sales of those vehicles are zero emission by 2050. There's been lots of evidence of the health benefits of this. The Rocky Mountain Institute estimates that among the 15 states that, along with Maryland, are participating in this effort, they will see fewer premature deaths, 477 fewer premature deaths, and over 6,000 fewer asthma incidents per year. And that's $3.5 billion a year. And that's on top of the climate benefits. I think it's important to point out to my colleagues that while heavy-duty trucks, medium trucks account for only 10% of vehicles on the road, they produce about a quarter of the overall greenhouse gas emissions. So one of the challenges that Volvo which is a company in Hagerstown, Maryland, is facing, and they developed the powertrain manufacturing, the powertrains. They have a facility there. One of the issues they have there is the issue of charging infrastructure for medium and heavy-duty trucks. So, Ms. Gross, could you briefly describe some of the challenges we're facing in this particular sector and what we should be doing about it?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. Let me focus on the solutions first, and then I'll go to maybe recap on some of the challenges. The most important thing that we can do in this sector for heavy-duty, medium-duty sector is to get pilot programs out there. It is amazing what fleet operators learn by just purchasing and putting into their fleet the first 1-2 trucks, understanding what the relationship has to be with the utility, understanding what charging is, how it works, what it means to discuss rates and off-peak times and on-peak times, and what the economic opportunities are to actually work with the utility on those rates. So the fleet, this idea that we need to continue pilot programs is really alive. It's not the ones that have already started it, but every fleet in the country should start to understand what it would mean to actually have that experience behind you. Once you have that experience, you make better decisions about right-sizing charging and right-sizing the grid requirements for it. We need to prioritize feeders. Where are these truckloads likely to show up? So we've got the E-Road map out there that describes and shows you visually where the loads are expected to come from. We've got Volvo data, Daimler truck data. We know we have the telemetry. We know where the diesel vehicles travel throughout the country. So being able to prioritize where they are today and where they're likely to be when they're electric is super important for prioritizing these investments on the grid. And then finally, one interesting thing is we are kind of going about this piecemeal today. This holds true for light duty vehicles as well, but on the medium and heavy duty trucking sector where these loads can be very concentrated on local distribution systems, we wait, the utility industry can really only invest once a customer shows up and says, hey, I've got this load coming. Can you please, upgrade the grid for me? I'm coming with this charging load. If we would step back and consider, in its totality, how much load is coming when more fleets, 20%, 40%, 80%, we could do a better job up front, more cost-effective job of putting these solutions in place. And so I would encourage everyone to focus on sort of those big nuances about the trucking sector that are important. And this whole timing mismatch, I know that's on top of mind for Volvo as well. The timing mismatch between the time it takes to get grid power to a site versus the time it takes to order a few semi-trucks. And I said in my testimony earlier, I can order a fleet of semi-electric trucks and they can be delivered in 4 to 6 months. And the grid upgrades probably can't be made in those same 4 to 6 months. So we've got to get we got to get ahead of this challenge.
Well, so this is the issue. I mean, Volvo is actually losing orders right now from people that want to, purchase these electric medium and heavy duty trucks, but can't because of this issue of charging stations. So I hope we will, on a relatively urgent basis, move forward. I mean, this is the sort of chicken and the egg problem we've seen in other parts of this sector. I may have some questions to submit for the record, but I see my time is out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.